Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webinar on market access strategies hosted by MC Services AG. For those who are not familiar with MC Services, we are in business since 25 years and today are a team of 40 consultants advising a portfolio of about 80 clients from the international life science industry, and we are advisors for international communications and investor relations. My name is Raymond Gabriel. I'm the founder and I'm also a managing director at MC Services. We have observed in recent years that many emerging biotech firms have been struggling to achieve significant progress in their financing and in also their partnering activities. And we know that the number of private and public market financings has been very low in the past 2 years and just picked up recently. And we also saw that the number of partnering events that emerging European biotech could achieve was not spectacular in the past years, although the deal sizes increased. So this led us to the question we would like to discuss with you today about what can we do to change that modest success rate in business development, financing, and partnering? How could this be improved? And we are excited very much to welcome today two experts in business development and in strategy and in market access strategies. And I feel very honored to introduce from Staatz Business Development and Strategy, Dr. Irina Staatz, the CEO, and also her colleague, Dr. Manfred Caeser, both seasoned experts in the field of market access and strategy. They will provide insights into the complexities of market access in life science and healthcare. We are confident you will find this session informative and valuable. And after the presentation, we will have time for your questions. You are welcome to submit questions through the Q&A field you find at the bottom of your screen. So let me please hand over now to Dr. Irina Staatz and welcome. And Irina, please, the stage is yours.
Yeah, Raymond, thank you very much. We are very pleased to be here and to share some experiences and insight in the relevance of market access strategies early on in the development process with an impact on partnering success, but also on investment success. Before we start, please allow me to introduce myself and my colleague, Manfred Caeser. I have started and founded Staatz Business Development more than 18 years ago. And we do transaction services, advisory, as well as consulting and market access. I have been in the pharmaceutical as well as the biotech industry. And today we are working with biotech companies in the first place from all over the world, supporting them in those two areas. Manfred?
Yeah, my name is Manfred Caeser. I'm by training a neuroscientist. I got a diploma in economics from Henley University College, and I am in the market access business now, health economics, market access experience for 25 years. I've done this with companies like Merck Sherman and SmithKline Beecham and Nycomed, and acting as a global head of market access with Altana Pharma and Nycomed. And what I'm looking for, pricing and reimbursement, largely in medium-sized companies. I was a principal within New York-based management consultancies, handling market access in European countries. And last but not least, what I primarily do is health economics, market access strategy down to price negotiations with payers in different countries. I'm kind of the principal market access consultant, and I'm happy to be here and give you some additional insight into market access activities. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Manfred. So without further ado, we start with the topic. And what we want to show you, as outlined before, how relevant are market access strategies during the product development chain? What is the impact on financing and partnering success? And what is the right stage to start to think about those strategies going forward? Now, what we observe in many cases that investors, but also founders, underestimate the significance of the commercial intelligence. This is a relevant aspect for investment decisions, but also for development decisions. And if there is an HTA-guided development that is in time with mandatory HTA deadlines, this has usually a great impact on the generation of value. And with the generation of value, then of course, this improves significantly the investment chances, but also the partnering and the exit success. Next chart, please. Yeah. Well, what is the difference between regulatory affairs and market access? Traditionally, clinical trials were designed to meet the requirements that were set by regulatory bodies to gain marketing authorization, and that was it. For many years now, it's clear that in Europe, but also in other regions, the market access, pricing, and reimbursement negotiation creates something that is called sometimes the fourth hurdle. And that refers in essence to the relevant documentation to be submitted to the HTA bodies for getting a status regarding the value of the product, and later on this forms the basis for the reimbursement price negotiation. So it goes hand in hand, and one cannot think about one without the other. Next. In essence, what was clearly seen in the past, that after EMA approval, still a number of drugs fail to reach an added benefit status, which is, as you know, a crucial status to get a premium price vis-a-vis standard therapy. And in fact, more than half of the products ended up with no added value status, which in essence means they get a low reimbursement price. And this holds true in several countries. It's not just a German phenomenon. It is actually true across Europe, but also in other legislations as well. So that means one has to prepare this in time and to take educated development decisions in order to end up at the best possible position for a certain product candidate. Next chart. The commercial value of a product candidate is not only determined by epidemiology or indication per se. It's also a matter of how the market looks like, what is the competition, the standard therapy, and the associated reimbursement price, which determine the reimbursement price prospects for a new product candidate. So having development decisions that are guided by HTA principles and leading in an ideal case for value optimization, this is a good platform or a good starting point for refinancing the company, but also for business development. In business development, knowing about the positioning, the TPP, and the competitive situation of a new product candidate has also an impact not only on the partnering success at all, but also on the structure of deals. For example, it's quite common these days to apply milestones relative to reimbursement price levels, or to reimbursement at all, to structure upfront and deferred payments according to the confidence in a certain reimbursement price level and the associated commercial value of a product. Last but not least, as another example, the volumes that are sold can be high at a low price or low at a high price. So this then has an impact on cost of goods, and this in turn has an impact on the return on investment. So all of this makes it inevitable to think about HTA at a quite early stage already. Next slide. I hear quite often from clients who say, well, this is patent protected, or I have a new mode of action. This should be a value in itself. And the bad news is, unfortunately, this isn't, not from the perspective of the payers. The payers are looking for the demonstration of the value of a new product compared to what is out there already, and they have agreed to pay for. So demonstrating the benefits, the value of a product vis-a-vis a comparator is key in designing a study, a clinical study, and this can be as early as phase 2, but is mandatory in phase 3. Now, the endpoints that one uses are not necessarily equivalent in regulatory affairs as opposed to market access, because market access looks at a much broader view on things such as quality of life, independence of patients who are all of a sudden maybe able to master normal everyday tasks on their own. Or they look at cost efficiency, such as the UK system, where they consider, does the new therapy, for example, reduce the number of days in an ICU, just to name a few examples. So starting early with market intelligence to get a view on what is the standard therapy, is every patient the appropriate patient for a new therapy, or is the majority of patients well off with standard therapy, maybe even with generic therapy, and I have to look for a certain subsegment that profits the most from this new therapy. What is the standard of care, and what is the level of reimbursement? Other payer relevant value criteria. This all together forms the target product profile and the development objective. Next slide. Yeah, and with this, I hand over to my colleague Manfred to explain or to outline to you a few principles of market access and their relevance in all those aspects of product development, investment, and partnering.
Thank you, Irina. I will take over now and basically start with to remind you about the current market access practice. And when I say market access, I mean pricing and reimbursement in particular, market access practice in Europe. And when it comes to medicinal products, in particular pharmaceuticals, Europe is indeed a tightly controlled market. That tightly controlled, however, is not executed in the same way across different European countries. It has elements at national levels and even at regional levels that need to be adopted and complied with in a number of pharmaceutical countries. But what all countries have in place somehow is a health technology appraisal system. This is the predominant feature in Europe to understand what additional value or what value a new medicinal product will bring to the market. And as you can see here, the fragmentation across Europe, this is still in a striking difference versus the harmonized EMA marketing authorization process, which means there is one marketing authorization applicable to all countries. We are far away from that when it comes to market access. So can I have my next slide, please? From this introduction, you can already deduce what payers want is different, but they always want a lot. And this can be seen here for 5 illustrative markets, like from France to UK. You can see that all countries somehow have an HTA process in place. They have different key decision driver they would look into in order to come up with a decision. And last not least, they are although not really aligned on pricing rules. I do not want to go into very much detail here, but there are 2 things I would address and highlight. One is, from France to Spain, the comparative therapeutic value assessment is a key element to do, because they do not trust in what the EMA has said. Trust means EMA does efficacy. They want to understand what the effectiveness looks like. And the effectiveness is always a comparative thing. And the only country that is a bit of an outlier here is the UK, which asks for the cost effectiveness analysis, which in a sense is comparative as well. So what it means is, for every pharmaceutical company, you need to adopt and need to look into the guidelines in each individual country and prepare for individual customized submissions across the European territory. Next slide, please. So in preparation for that, and in this regard, what questions should be answered and what questions and issues should be tackled? I mean, foremost, this is my first bullet point here, is what is actually the indication I would like to go to? What is the patient segment I should go for in order to optimize my commercial value and my return on investment? There may be difference across countries, and there may be difference within an indication. So careful preparation is the thing to do. The next thing is the anticipated reimbursement status and the price consistent with the product offer? We do not want to have any mismatch. So that is an issue to look into. What is the value story versus the standard of care? As said earlier, it's a comparative analysis. So you look into the comparator and you need to have a value story why my product should be rewarded a premium price versus the comparator and occupy a preferred reimbursement position. So it's the aspired reimbursement status and the price matching with the treatment reality is another item, what I need to understand. And ultimately, all that is merged into the question, how should I best do my clinical development in accordance with the different HTA assessment requirements, reimbursement requirements, and price negotiations? And last not least, do it in a timely manner, because there are timelines applicable at what time a dossier needs to be submitted to the payer, and nothing is more damaging than missing the timeline with the payers. So many questions to ask, many preparation needed, but what does it mean in the context of development? Next slide, please. How can we do this best? Usually, you can get sucked in by so many variables to look at, but there are just 4 variables that really matter most. One is RCT. It is the question, what is the type of clinical trial that is most rewarding, most accepted? You can have open label studies, you can have single arm studies, and you can have whatever, you name it. But what is really the thing to do is a randomized controlled clinical trial. Even if maybe the EMA is open to whatever kind of trial, a randomized clinical trial is what payers usually want. Related to that, you can almost guess it from what I said before. What is the appropriate comparator, which is standard of care? May differ from different subpopulations. and may differ across countries, but to identify and apply the appropriate comparator is the second thing to do, because the comparator will be your price anchor in upcoming negotiations. The appropriate endpoints. Here, the focus is on what people usually call patient-relevant endpoints. It has to be looking at the symptoms, no surrogate endpoints. And when it comes to patient-reported outcomes, it needs to be validated, it needs to be accepted by the different payers. And last but not least, are the results valid? So are they of relevance for the decision to come up with, or are they applicable in the relevant healthcare context? So everything what we have here is to walk away from efficacy and think about effectiveness. And that needs to be captured in the submission, and the database for that is the phase 3 clinical development. Next slide, please. So now, earlier, in a few slides earlier, I told you Europe is still very fragmented, with every country doing it its own way. But this may change. This is about to change, and there is a new kid on the block coming around. This is the EU Net HTA. The point is, for good or bad, we do not really know yet what this means for the industry and whether this will be of any beneficial or not. Let's go to the basics briefly. It applies beginning in January 2025. There is a new assessment framework in place. It's called Joint Clinical Assessment, JCA, that is applicable across all member states, and it's a joint scientific consultation to avoid duplicative efforts. And the system has 3 stages. Its introduction is basically a staggered approach. One is beginning in January 2025, every new application for marketing authorization in cancer and regulated ATMPs will go through this JCA assessment as well. In January 2028, it's planned to broaden this scope by including all orphan medicinal products. And finally, the mature state will be reached in 2030, which means all medicinal products are expected to go through this process. Next slide then. So, and here, and I'm just repeating myself, comparative or relative clinical effectiveness is again the key to succeed, because they different maybe from EMA decisions, which is heavy with placebo. It will be a comparative clinical assessment required for the new technology. Next slide then, please. So the point then is, having done all this, you do your submission, they do the analysis, you are able to participate in this, and so on and so on. The question is, what will come out of this? Because I said earlier, or I think it's not binding. The question is, what are member states doing with the results they get from the JCA assessment? And here, finally, the regional decision maker basically managed to keep their autonomy. The autonomy to decide and to do something and put it in practice remains with the individual country. So the countries, the member states, keep their remit with regards to what conclusions can I draw from the analysis presented to me. The next question is, they are still in a position to decide on what to do with it and what not to do with it. So and finally, the application is still in the hand of the individual country and the decision maker in the individual country. So there is some skepticism around in the industry still, whether this will add only work or really mean something. It could mean duplication of work, or it could mean to get rid of some of the national activities. We will see. But here, it's not finally decided. It's clear not everything will be now handled at EMA level. A lot of activity will remain in the hand of local decision makers. Can I have the next slide then? But the question is, what does that mean for companies? And it means the time frame now and the workload now for sure will go up. Here we are sketching out to you the sequence of different activities, but I will not go into this. What it means for sure is the following. With the national market access authorization, submitting for example, a dossier for an HTA, you usually need to do this at the time of marketing authorization or time of product launch. With the new process, you need to step into the game much earlier because it's a joint assessment, which means your dossier now needs to be ready 1.5 years earlier. So, and it needs to be a parallel submission for the clinical marketing authorization and for the JCA assessment, which means more work for sure, and definitely a more extended timeline, which means company will be busy with market access now for a much longer period of time. That's what basically is around the corner to arrive in a few months now. Next slide then. So that leads me to the point, earlier planning. When should I plan for this? Earlier is better than later. Here we recommend to take this on as early as phase 2, because the phase 2 is you have still sufficient time to do a competitive landscape check, to look what's going on in the countries, to look at what different payers are doing, to decide and investigate different launch indications, and basically to optimize your phase 3 clinical trial design in the light of payer requirements in different countries. So you have time and the flexibility and the insight to optimize and design the clinical development plan in accordance with payer requirements across your key markets. When you start with this in phase 3, then it's probably too late because you are bound by making use of the data, that will come from the already ongoing clinical trial, phase 3 clinical trial, which may not be very much in line with what the payers want. So the recommendation is start early, prepare early, but the real action is certainly the execution of the phase 3 clinical trial, which focuses on regulatory and market access. Then, next slide, please. To illustrate this a little bit, we would like to present to you 2 case studies. One is sketched out here in the background. But we were working with the Japanese pharmaceutical companies, engaging in a new treatment for breast cancer and very much interested in the United Kingdom. So the point was then the company was a bit unsure about whether their clinical trial preparations and their not so advanced ideas about pharmacoeconomic model will get a positive acceptance by NICE. So there was, in simple words, substantial uncertainty with regards to the acceptance of the whole development. So thus the utility of the study to qualify was basically unclear and what this could mean for the cost effectiveness. The solution was a landscape analysis. When we looked into this, we did a landscape analysis of decisions by NICE on breast cancer in similar methodology. We revised the TPP. Following this, we produced the study synopsis and went to NICE for scientific advice and received from NICE a confirmation for the endpoints, for this trial design, and for the modeling approach. And then next slide, please. So the outcome was an implementation plan. How can we get this tangible advice from NICE into the ongoing clinical development? The solution was we filed an amendment that was approved, and we are now doing a modified, or the company is doing an upgraded clinical trial that in particular takes into account nice modeling requirements. Next slide then. So the second case study is a little bit different. It was a pharmaceutical companies considering development of a product in a complex and mature indication in all Europe. The whole picture is further complicated by different severity grades with different patient subgroups and treatments applicable. And what the company learned in early partnering discussions for the development and commercialization partner was there was a bit of a frustration about not being really focused and not really being strategic and operational on target. So they experienced some companies in interest walking away from the asset by saying the asset owner is not up to speed and not prepared. Next slide, please. So how can we approach it? We did this by doing a landscape analysis first because it's a mature indication. It has treatment alternatives, different patient subgroups, different severities, and different countries. So the first thing to do was a landscape analysis to understand how to do this and what is already ongoing in this. The next solution was then was a segmentation of the indication. This means what are the most rewarding subpopulations and sub-indications from a market access point of view, and an appraisal, a critical appraisal of the feasibility of the planned clinical and pharmacoeconomic studies in the context of market access. So the solution of this approach then was an integrated recommendation how to move ahead. And what was the outcome? The outcome was an aligned regulatory clinical market access strategy, a corresponding optimized target product profile, and last but not least, a tailored development plan that takes all this into account, now used in partnering discussions and finance discussions with other companies. Next slide. I think I need to hurry up a bit. So will this all go away? And I mean, when we prepared these slides, we thought we should have a slide like this, but when you read the daily paper currently, you will know from the daily discussion, this will not go away because money is short. And when it comes to pharmaceuticals, there is an additional reasons. Pharma is in focus of payers, of ministries of health, of HTA agencies. And here we are basically showing to you the German example with regards to orphan medicines included in the so-called AMNOG added benefit assessment. You can see for two different time periods, 2011, 2015, and 16 to 20, that the orphan added benefit assessments in Germany increased from 20 to 34%. So companies are increasingly submitting orphan added benefit assessments to the GBA. At the same time, the annual therapy cost for orphan products went up from 97,000 per year to 540,000 per year, thanks to the gene therapies and ATMPs mainly. And last not least, orphan is very popular. Orphans, but fail to show sufficient data using the perspective here of the payer of the GBA. 46% in 2011 to 15 and 78% from 16 to 20 only qualified for the so-called non-quantifiable added benefit, which means the company was not successful in presenting sufficient clinical data. And you can take this for granted. Because of that development, payers will become more and more creative and more innovative to make it difficult for companies to get away with no data or only limited data in support of the high price aspiration. Next slide then. So when we do this, we segment the activities along three different phases. the early phase, maybe clinical development phase 1, phase 2. Then we have a late phase strategy, phase 3, and maybe up to launch or shortly before launch. And last but not least, the launch and post-launch phase. Here we have different activities, like, for example, landscape analysis, strategic positioning of the product, early stakeholder dialogue, and pivotal clinical trial design. This is what I said earlier is a good thing to do in phase 2, the latest, in order to be prepared for the clinical development in phase 3. In phase 3, then, in the late phase strategy, here it's TPP validation to get the economic analysis right, to have a pricing strategy, and to have an effective value communication tool in place to proceed with this in the access operations and implementation phase, which really means dossier generation, dossier defense, price negotiations, and reimbursement negotiations across Europe. So you can see it's staggered approach as well: preparation, execution, and then defense with payers in the last phase. Next slide then, please. So taking you through market access in Europe and what kind of changes may come in the near future, I just want to wrap this up by saying it's considered progressively along the development cycle. It's important to consider in development as well, and it should be an integral part of every development strategy for medicinal product and pharmaceutical products in particular. It has to be commenced during early development to meet the timelines, because things take time, and when you start too late, you do not have the time to make sure payers find the data they need. And finally, it's key for value optimization, financing, and partnering, because business partners definitely look at whether a company is prepared for that or not prepared for that. That brings me to an end, and I thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Manfred. Thank you, Irina, for your great presentation and for these insights into market access strategy. So we would like to come now to the Q&A session. So please, if you have questions, enter them in the F&A or Q&A button. You can add questions here, and we have been receiving already some questions, so I can start right away, but please feel free to add your questions still in the process. So one question was about, assuming the M&A holder shows superior patient adherence to a comparator, could this have a positive impact on price negotiations? This is the question from one of our participants.
Is adherence, I think adherence means compliance. And the point is, I would say this is only a surrogate. The payer would like to see what is the health benefit resulting from this adherence. So they will ask for example, if the patient is more compliant and uses the medication for longer, does this result in a reduction of patient-relevant symptoms and other health benefits? Otherwise, it is not supported.
Okay, thank you, Manfred. So I have another question. This is, can you comment on key MA considerations that companies should already consider during preclinical R&D stages before phase 1? So what could be the key market access considerations before phase 1?
I think someone needs to really get clarity on the commercial value of certain indications and patient segments, and this in comparison to the standard therapy that is available at a given time. So having a good view on how does the landscape look like, what is the standard therapy that is out there, and what is the price tag for the standard therapy, are key elements that one should be aware of and update accordingly throughout the development process in order to take the right development decisions.
Good. Thank you, Irina. Thank you. I have another question, which is pointing rather to the other end of the development process. What happens if a company realizes at a quite late stage of its development that it has not been strategically addressing market access before, or not at least enough? Is there a chance to change and to heal that mistake, or how is that going?
Well, as you have seen, the timelines are quite tight. So there is not much room for missing evidence generated during clinical development. So if you don't have it, then you don't have it. And that means in essence, you might come out with a much lower assessment of the value of the added benefit, and as a consequence with the reimbursement price.
Yeah, I would like to add to this. As Irina already said, the opportunities to escape this situation are rather slim. And what may be possible, but that requires a close look at the situation, is whether a modified application for a marketing authorization going for a niche indication only or whatsoever could heal a little bit of the situation, but that is really trying for an escape rather than a planned and a really thorough process.
Yeah. Maybe what we should add as well is one hears quite often, okay, if I don't have the required evidence generated as part of my clinical development plan, I just go for indirect comparison. And indirect comparison means, in essence, that I look into the literature to other products and try to compare what I have with what other companies did and with the results. But in essence, this does not work out in many, many cases. A, because the clinical trials are not comparable, and B, because then the HTA bodies under normal circumstances do have difficulties to accept it, particularly in Germany.
Okay, thank you, Irina. Thank you, Manfred. We have another question here. I read it to you. What was the logic behind the decision to start the application harmonization with one of the most complex therapeutic areas, ATMP in particular?
Can you repeat the question, please?
What was the logic behind the decision to start the application harmonization with one of the most complex therapeutic areas, ATMP? Maybe I can ask to give more explanation.
I don't know whether there is really a rationale published why they settled for this one, but I assume it's due to the fact that exactly it's complex to value this, and they don't have fixed processes up to now, and so they are trying to harmonize this. I mean, going for the EU legislative means that they are trying to capture the situation and the view of every EU member state. This way makes the whole situation super complicated, because there may be different therapy standards in different countries, as Manfred outlined, and different price levels anyway. We need to see how this works out.
Okay.
I would like to add, I would exactly do this where a white sheet of paper is in front of me. For introducing a new system, going for indications, going for diseases already well established across Europe with different policies in place, I fight from the beginning against these established practices. So when no one knows how to deal with ATMPs and things like that, it's a kind of a fresh start. So from a practical point of view, it might be a sensible decision, but the complexity will not disappear.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Another question, and then I think we will come soon to an end of our session today. But this question is also very interesting. Are there any new trends in AT&P like CAR-T or gene therapy pricing, reimbursement? And if yes, how do they differ in the different EU countries? I think that opens a broad field. But maybe you can find a way to answer that question, Manfred, Irina.
Yeah, I can try. What I think here is what we see is at least here in Germany is the establishing conditional added benefit status and thus conditional price agreements for these products. Because for these very expensive gene therapies, for example, what is usually done is the companies sit together with the GBA and negotiate a protocol for collecting real-world evidence, subject for resubmission sometime later. So that means even if you don't like to do this in a very structured way, the payer is now involved in the design of real-world evidence data collection, and that data, of course, will be seen not just in Germany but in other European countries as well. So that is certainly a development I think is notable and relevant beyond a single country.
But we should be clear that up to now the EU legislation is looking for an evaluation of the evidence of the value of a product in comparison with standard therapy. The price setting is something that is still and will remain in the local obligation.
Okay, thank you for this answer. And maybe a last question I see here is, what would be a typical entry or starting point for a market access project or for defining a market access strategy? Do you have a typical entry situation you could describe us?
Well, as I think it was maybe already apparent, what we usually do is really to get an overview, a landscape analysis of the market that is targeted, of the comparative situation, what is out there, what are the gaps, what is the price band for the comparative therapy, and then to see to what extent is the target patient population already pretty good covered and treated by the standard therapy. So where are the gaps?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Irina. Thank you very much, Manfred. And thank you also to all the participants. Our year is soon coming to an end. We have still a few partnering conferences going on and investors conferences, but the next year is already inside. JP Morgan is coming. So if you would like to benefit from market access considerations, please feel free to contact Irina and Manfred by time, because I think everything will need a very thoughtful and deep dive preparation, I guess. So to start early, to begin. Thank you very much, everybody, and hope we see each other soon again. Goodbye.
Goodbye.